I am Sydney Kitt, and with me today we have.
Uh, JM Hunter. So
We are both comic, cartoon, comic, whatever kind of artist you want to call us, and
creators.
creators. Just period. We do
Yeah,
everything.
pretty
Have
much.
multiple hats. But we're here representing the Columbus Cartoon Coalition, and we're going to go over the topic of what tools do you need to make comics. Last week we had Ben and Kelsey go over what is a comic, which, as they determined, is as difficult as answering the question of if a hot dog is a sandwich. Can't really define comics, yet what you can define, we've found, is what tools you need to make comics. So, unless you want to add anything, I think we'll go ahead and start talking about the different tools.
Well, we might end up having that debate again because I plan on muddying the waters of what tools you can use to make
That's fair.
comics. So,
That's fair. So we're going to start off with this very lovely drawing that Jan has made.
yeah,
Kind of a good way to talk about tools is you can never have enough art supplies, right?
that's what I tell my wife, but she doesn't always agree. But yeah, definitely. Art supplies, and there are some things that are unconventional that also work for making comics. It's like an endless opportunity of experimentation and with different mediums to tell a story. Because ultimately, when it comes to comics, what we're doing is storytelling, right? So how you tell that story and how it's conveyed to the audience, to the viewer, or if it's just for your own personal journey, I think is definitely a fluid conversation that people either have with themselves or with each other or with future generations. In fact,
I think that was a good way to sum it up for sure.
yeah.
Um, so what we're going to do to start off is we're going to kind of go through the two different methods of creating comics, or at least the two popular terms when it comes to making comics. And that's traditional comics and digital comics, or digital comic making. How would you describe traditional comics?
So traditional comics, basically, we can get into the weeds of defining what comics are, and it sounds like that happened last episode. But
Mhm.
as far as traditional comics, it's basically what is otherwise known as analog materials. So your basic fine art materials are things that you would physically use to put down lines, marks, and convey your story in that manner, as opposed to electronically. Everything that happens before the photocopying or the scanning to create comics, to pictures and words.
Yeah, so things like paper,
Mm-hmm.
pen. Um, and when it comes to paper, I know paper is a preference. One paper that I like to use is bristleboard.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how you spell it.
Yeah.
A little bit thicker of a board. Um, Imagine like a couple of pieces of construction paper glued together. It's a little bit thicker, kind of has that texture of not cardboard, construction
Cardstock
paper.
and cardstock. Yeah.
Yeah, it handles a lot of different things: pens, papers, watercolors, all of that. So I personally like bristle board. Is there any specific paper that you like?
Yeah. Bristol board is what I used to use when I thought about traditionally making comics and making them how the big industry made
Hmm.
them. But what I found nowadays is mixed media paper, which is still somewhat of a lighter version of cardstock, but it has a tooth where you can use wet and dry media on it. With Bristol board, you can oftentimes will have the smooth surface, and then maybe sometimes if it's vellum, there might be a tooth to it, or it might be one side's coated, one side's not. But with the mixed
Hmm.
media paper, I feel like just using like Canson mixed media paper from Walmart pads even work really well for making comics. A lot of, especially discovering the planning community and the crafting community and how they use different materials. I noticed they were using a lot of materials that worked well with mixed media comics and stuff like that. They were almost like a conversation that you could have between there's connective tissue is a phrase I love to use. I should just make a book called Connective Tissue. Um, and I felt like these disciplines were able to go back and forth. So also, if you think about when we talk about young people or just people, when it comes to budget concerns, with inflation, things of that nature going up,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to, if you're serious about having equitable, um, opportunities in comics or creating, then you don't want to always get stuck on the expensive stuff, which I've used to get stuck on it. I still do it every now and then, but Walmart has those mixed media pads or spiral bounds that are very much affordable, even as low as $3 and some change, and you can still pull off a lot of the comic book making, and then some, with those pads. And also they're small enough to fit on a scanner when you do decide to go to the digital or take it to the next stage. And young people carrying them around in their backpacks, or if you're just into travel journaling, things of that nature, it's even more comics in general, whether it be digital or analog, have even more accessibility and options available to you now, as opposed to when it was almost like a specific elite craftsmanship and stuff like that. So yeah.
But yeah, so basically, there's a ton of different paper options out there. You're not limited to anything. As JM recommended, get whatever paper that you want. Try it at Walmart. Try it at any of the stores. Get a couple of, notebooks that have different style paper. It all just kind of depends on what you want. But these tend to be the papers
Mhm.
that we
But it
use.
could also be done in this. Now you see me carry this around, and I've sometimes got myself stuck with too many options. But it could be with a template that you would use for school or
Mm-hmm.
geometry. But imagine all these different shapes and lines, and almost like an Ames lettering guide in there if you want traditional. This everyday carry kit that a lot of military-minded weekend warriors, I guess, do. I like to collect art supplies, so that's what I use everyday carry for. Is like how many different types of art supplies can I get in here? So this little thing carries a sketchbook that can handle ink. I've got index cards for now you have this little comic thing that has word balloons on the back of it for like I basically try to leave no excuse to being able to create comics if I want to, if the inspiration
Mm-hmm.
strikes me. And this is what I also extend to my students. This is what I go over. I try to do the opposite of gatekeeping. I try to make sure these gates are open as wide as possible. So even Post-its, we're even playing around with Post-its right now. I went to the dollar store and bought a pack of Post-its of different types of shapes and sizes just to
Mm-hmm.
show them design theory and just the cropping's already done for you, especially in the age of Instagram comics, right? The
Mm-hmm.
ratio, is something that people like to take advantage of nowadays and can use. And there's some great comics. When we're ready to segue into digital comics, that's something we can kind of elaborate more on.
Yeah, for sure. But when it comes to traditional comics, we talked about paper. So now we'll move into pens. Same thing with paper. I mean, you can do whatever pens you want. The pens that I like to use are called micron pens. I believe it. They're kind of imagine a Sharpie, but the difference is that the micron pens have different sizes to them. So you know how Sharpies usually have the one size and then the tiny size? Well, micron pens have, different sizes in between the two. So it's really, really nice. You can also get different shades too, depending on what store you go to. Um, but that's one that I've liked to use. I have also used Sharpie before. Are there any specific pens that you like to use?
Essentially, what we're talking about is technical tech pens or fine liners. Is broadly what they might be called, but the microns are one of the popular brands, Sakura or Pigma. Um,
Pigment.
when it comes to Sharpies come in the broad size that you're used to, chisel size, twin tips, and the fine or ultra fine. I find the ultra fine liner are good for scribble portraits or scribbling artwork. Those ones I actually, because they tend to bleed, it's a lot more messier. They
Mhm.
don't have but they're also lower. cost than fine liners than the microns. When it comes to microns, I have a love-hate relationship with them. Like the number
Really?
3 and number 5, I really like, but the number 8, it never fails that the number 8 always gets clogged or just dries out on me, and I can't. And you have to hold it so much more vertical, to try and get a consistent line that I find that I usually have problems because a lot of the work I did was with a bold, thick contour line, and then it
Mhm.
just so happens that the pen that I need to do that, if I use microns, doesn't want to play ball with me. So so we tend to fight with one another. So I find myself using a bunch of different varieties of technical pens. It could be the Copic multiliners. It could be the Faber-Castell, pit pens, even, which
Yeah.
are fun for doodling. They also have chisel tips, brush tips, stuff like that, or even that Pilot, the refillable Pilot pocket brush pen that emulates almost like a brush, but it's like the cross between a fine liner or technical pen and using a brush. So if you want to experiment with that, that's also a good entry level to try and work on your inking lines and brush work.
For sure. I feel like we kind of jumped the gun a bit with pen because you always want to start with pencil, right?
Yeah, or ballpoint pen, because I would also argue that a ballpoint pen, you can get a lot of the same tonality and gradation for shading with a ballpoint pen. A cheap
Mhm.
Bic pen happens to be great, and the results are very similar to working with pencil, except you don't have the luxury or the crutch of using an eraser. And the reason why this is so important is that when you're trying to learn how to draw and put marks down, you don't want to get stuck in the loop of trying to erase what you put down. The whole intention should be about making the marks, making the mistakes, and learning from them. And then by using the ballpoint pen, you can get a lot of the same principles and studies that you do with pencil and graphite, but without the eraser. It causes you to own it and to move on and to keep refining. That way you don't get stuck in what's already happened in the past. You're more about progression and moving forward.
That's that's well put. But for those who like the ability to be able to erase, pencils are a great way to just, doodle it out there, try to get everything set the way you want. And then what you do is you use the pen to go on top of the pencil once you finally got that final frame, that final position, and then you just erase the pencil. To do that, you can just use any kind of pencil, right? Mechanical, um,
Yeah.
number two.
Or color pencils, even with the Prismacolor, color pencils. A lot of people use those. The pigment
Mhm.
is a little more waxy, but yeah. Again, erasing is there's so yeah, erasing can sometimes cause tears in the pages if you draw too dark or have a heavy hand like myself, and that was
Mhm.
something I used to find. So either you have to work on lightening up and holding the pencil more at a distance when you're sketching, or just put down lighter lines and then commit to that with the ink like you're talking about, so that way you
Mhm.
can erase. Or you would eventually do a series of playing around in Photoshop and stuff like that to remove the color or the pigment. That's why blue line was such a thing, in comic industry. Blue line are red now because they can remove almost either of those colors. But it
Yeah.
hit pretty big in the early millennium, especially. Everyone was trying to get that kind of blue line because you used to not be able to reproduce on a copier, so you didn't have to erase and tear up your pages. Once you put the ink down, the blue line just wouldn't show up when you Xeroxed it.
Yes. So that's what I was going to say next
Mhm.
is that if you're starting your comic traditionally, so on paper, um, and you want to do a pencil first, then ink it, I would always recommend using photo blue pencils.
Yeah,
That is the exact name of it. It is photo blue. And the reason why it's called photo blue is because when you scan it, the scanners cannot register that photo blue color and won't show up in the scan. So instead of having to
yeah,
manually erase it, it kind of erases it for you when scanning. Um, it's also a nice one to just use because it's very light.
hmm
And if you forget to erase a certain part of the panel, you don't have to worry. It's very light. But I would really only strongly use that for scanning. or for
Yeah.
what you have the intention of scanning it in. So yeah, I think that's about it with pencils, right?
Well, I can add a couple addendums, if that's how you say the word. I'm
Yeah.
firing on all cylinders today. With the some of the scanners have gotten better to where they do pick up that blue, and then that's where you take the channel in Photoshop and remove it like a lever, how you
Yeah.
do on your Instagram selfies. If you're one of those people that like to take selfies, you're playing with all the filters. You already kind of already know this, believe it or not, on your phone, but you can remove that color and that'll do that. Also, using the blue pencil, even if you're not planning on scanning it, to lay out your work first and some of your roughs, and then go back over it with the mechanical pencil or a regular lead pencil, also gives you that second stage, that buffer to go ahead and figure some things out, especially if you're not as confident when you're penciling and drawing, and just gives
Mhm.
you an extra stage to refine what you're working on, and almost like a safety net, so to speak. So even if there's no digital intention later on, working with the other color sometimes helps you. It's almost like having X-ray vision. You know, you can see through things.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, when are you ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the best way to just generalize it is just miscellaneous,
Mhm.
because we talked about pencils and erasing. You're gonna need an eraser.
Yeah.
The other thing that you're definitely gonna want to have is whiteout.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid of whiteout. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. You're gonna make mistakes. It's part of the process,
It
right?
is. Yep.
And so you
And
need to look at whiteout as your best friend rather than covering up your mistakes. It is fantastic. It is such a great tool to have. So definitely get some whiteout, whether that's the brush or the tape, whatever it is. Whiteout's your friend.
or Presto pens, which are basically almost like drawing with whiteout. And if you want to make stars or
Yeah.
rain or make highlights, it's almost like where you use it and you squeeze it and you're literally able to draw with it practically. Or white gel pens are another tool that people use to really take the artwork to another level. And then the eraser. Speaking of erasers, going back to that thing about giving yourself somewhat of a safety net with penciling too hard or whatever, using a kneaded eraser, which is basically like the kind of like you can like a clay eraser kind of deal or putty.
Mhm.
Rolling that over your pencils, if you tend to draw heavy or dark, can lighten and take off some of that graphite when you're ready to ink. So that way you still can see your lines when you're inking, but yet you don't have to worry about erasing so hard afterwards after you've inked and then you tear the paper or you take off the ink. So that's another step in trying to basically preparing for the future. You're basically
Mhm.
thinking about your future self and trying to make their life easier, so that's kind of how that works.
For sure. I think another thing that I like to use is a ruler. Ooh, who doesn't like straight lines?
I don't apparently. I try, but I can't make a straight line with the ruler. Even it never fails. I make a crooked lines. I don't make perfect circles. But yet I've been doing comics for a very long time, and that's my whole philosophy when it comes to people thinking that they're not able to draw a straight line or they can only draw stick figures. Some of the best comics I've ever read were stick figures, and definitely with
Yes,
crooked lines. So
for sure. And I think going along that of who says you need straight lines, who says they can't be stick figures, who says you can't put glitter,
well, a bunch
who
of art directors might get mad if you try and do glitter, but nah.
well,
I'm using Legos today with my with this week with my classroom. We're working with Legos to basically tell our stories, So if you have other issues or challenges, you might find working with your hands better. You might learn better by doing that. So there's almost no shortage of things to tell your story. So,
yeah, and I think a good example of that is showing some more of JM's work. So let me switch over just for a second. Um,
yeah, while you're pulling that up, I'll point out this little image right here is actually my daughter's, my youngest daughter, and that's just
oh,
construction paper, chalk, pastel, and then a white. We were talking about the whiteout. So imagine having a whiteout, and you can go back on top of it. Well, I think Sydney got themselves knocked off the thing. But
I
they're
was
back. Okay.
trying to put the focus on you.
Yeah, that's all right.
Sorry.
The camera's like, we don't want him. But anyway, so just something as simple as this, basically. Now we
Mhm.
get to the multimedia aspect. That's my yearbook picture. That was 1990. No, we're not going to talk about what that was. But
Christy,
well,
you've already dated yourself by
yeah, I already
saying
dated myself. Yeah. So, anyways,
it.
so, but yeah,
But
that's when I had hair, and I was like, I under like only 130 pounds. So I've since doubled or tripled that.
that's all right. But
But
I think
yeah,
this is a good example of,
yeah.
we were talking about you can do anything you want. You can add anything that you want.
Hmm.
And so this is an example of he added his yearbook photo.
Hmm.
Um, there's different comic styles. I mean, you can add what you want.
Yeah.
That's the nice thing about comics is there's no one way to do it. There's so many ways to do it.
And someone that really, speaking of which, you pulled up the perfect example. Two people
Mhm.
that really influenced me, especially in the last couple of years when I went to get my MFA in comics, was Linda Berry and Emil Ferris. Linda Berry, syllabus. Check out Linda Berry
Mhm.
if you're a crafter or into collage or art journals and junk journals or just writing. You're more of a writer. Do yourself a favor and check out Linda Berry's books. Just mind blowing. And then Emil Ferris, my favorite thing is monsters, utilizing lined paper and things like that. This is what I meant by ballpoint pen and
Mhm.
lined paper, legal pad paper, and making comics, and then maybe adding a little bit of digital flavor with the text afterwards. So,
Yeah, so this is a comic,
yep,
but it's made on a simple legal pad of paper
yep,
that a lot of offices just have laying around. Who would have thought a comic would be on there?
yeah. And the marker is, I think, just some kids' color marker. And then if you look at the top line of text that's in purple or blue, whatever color that may be on your side,
It looks
the
purple.
yellow behind it is actually the folded part of the pad from the opposite page, folded over. So, and then the background that's is just my daughter's old IKEA table that makeup and markers got on, and then I ended up reusing it as my own table. So it's almost like in my hands, I feel like everything is a comic to me, and that's how I interpret like everything I do. I think in that thing being neurodivergent, ADHD, and other issues that I've had. I think in
Mhm.
sequential web storytelling arcs and patterns, and I filter the stimuli that I filter is almost like in the brain of sequential artwork and comics. So I feel like it's just you know, I don't know. The world is your medium. They say the world is your oysters, but I don't eat oysters, so I'll say the world is your medium, and you're free to explore that. In fact, we need many more explorations, from many more people. And it's a generation. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Every generation continues to impress me and show me new things. I don't stop learning, and receiving that type of creativity and just lessons from them. So.
Yeah. Well, are there any other additions you think we should put on this paper for traditional comics?
Traditional comics. Let's see. Let's talk about just like a little bit of a zine theory. Take a piece of paper, fold it up, and you've got boxes. You've already got the lines made for you, and
Mhm.
just approach taking. And this will work for animation students as well. Approach telling a story through a series of sequences of each box. What happens next? Answer the questions of who, what, where, when, why, and you'll see how you're able to tell a story and make comics. And that's something you can continue to go back to. So right
Yeah.
now my Ori's squeaking with her little Lambie toy, but I mean, but yeah, so yeah, I think we've just gotten the surface of what is possible with comics, and we can probably have many, many more years of conversations with this medium.
And
So
we'll definitely have more conversations about it. We have talks that are planned to talk about the difference between writing a one panel comic and writing a four panel comic.
yeah,
We have one that's designed just to talk about how to write, and there's one designed to just talk about character design. So make sure that you follow us on Instagram, Facebook for updates at c3.ohio. We'll post updates on when those live streams will happen. But they'll always be up on our YouTube channel, Columbus Cartoon Coalition. So keep an eye out.
There
for
we
the
go. Definitely a YouTube channel, and also check out the Kickstarters as a whole bunch of people contribute to those books. And my son is totally doing the thing I told him not to do when I'm on my stream. It never fails. I apologize.
Okay.
It's like clockwork.
That's all right.
But yeah. So
Um,
the anthologies is what I was going to say. You might want to
yeah.
mention. Don't you have an art challenge happening here about to wrap up that people should check out on
Yeah,
Instagram?
we're having a Draw This in Your Style that will be ending on January 31st, 2024. So
more specific examples of different voices showing you different looks. That's pretty much what we were talking about with all these different materials that you can use to tell your story or to draw a picture.
yeah, there's so many different ways to tell your story with the materials that you use. But yes, so when it comes to talking about digital comics, and these are just all artwork that you make on a laptop, tablet, even your phone. Like if you use Snapchat and you use the pen, that's another digital platform. So since you're not using paper in digital artwork, you would instead be using programs. And so I am currently using Clip Studio. Another main one that people like to use is Procreate. That is Apple only. So if you have an iPad or anything like that, you can use Procreate. Clip Studio works on Apple and Mac as well.
Android, Chromebooks, even if your Chromebook is a little bit more powerful enough, it'll work on a Chromebook and your Android phone too. So
yes. But these do have subscriptions, so I will mark that there. Are there any free programs that you can?
yes. Especially my students. My students definitely utilize the free programs. So I think it's called IBIS Paint is one of them. IBIS Paint.
IBS Paint?
IBIS.
IBIS.
IBIS. Yeah. So
Got it.
Paint. Medibang Paint might have a free version. A
What's it
robust
called?
program that is free. It's pretty powerful. Is Krita. Krita. And if you have a decent laptop, that's one that people you can see YouTube tutorials on all of these, but Krita is definitely a nice, powerful, and it's also open source, I think. So it's like a freeware. So it's made for everyone by everyone in a way for people that believe in having access to these type of programs and stuff like that. So those are a couple right there. Medibang Paint might be free, might have a free version as well.
What's it called?
Medibang, MEDIBANG Paint.
Okay.
So that's a good
I'll
start.
look into that before. Oh, I'll look into that before we give this worksheet out as a free resource. So yeah, so instead of pens, let's talk about the equipment that you might need.
Okay.
For equipment, it can be a laptop. Ooh. I currently use the Microsoft Surface Studio. Sorry, there's a couple of different ones. I was like, I'm going to say the wrong one.
Surface Book, Surface Studio, Surface Go.
I specifically chose the Surface Studio because here, I'll show it. This laptop, it folds out to be
nice. Okay.
So that's why I chose this. But you can use any kind of laptops. It doesn't have to have a touch screen. If it doesn't have a touch screen, it can't turn into a tablet. There are drawing pads. Do you know what are the main brands of drawing?
A Bamboo tablet is Bamboo tablets. They've got basically just a graphics tablet, Bamboo tablet. There's different budget versions. The Android tablets sometimes can have an all-in-one option, or like a beginning iPad be an all-in-one option. Your smartphone, like again, your smartphone, they're so powerful now. They're the equivalent of at least a quad-core computer, and you can get even generic styluses to draw. So, believe it or
Mhm.
not, you still can use a mouse. Also.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Um, when I was saying drawing pads, I was talking more about the pads that you plug into laptops that you already have.
yeah. So that would be like the bamboo tablets,
That
probably.
would be okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
There's another word, another one, and I can't remember it right now. It's just like it's. I don't want to say Wacom, or because I feel like that's so expensive high end that I don't even mess with that.
I mean, there's a ton of
Yeah.
different ones out there. Depends on what you need, what you use it for.
Hmm.
Um, what is the Amazon tablet? Is it a Fire something?
Oh, the Fires are more close to being like a reader and maybe the kids apps.
Oh, okay.
The only app that I remember being on there back from the generation one of those was Sketchbook Mobile, which is another free app, by the way.
I
And
love
that,
Facebook. I
yeah,
just didn't know
which
if
is
it
from
was still
Autodesk, which is
free.
still good stuff, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean that works. That works on Android phones as well. So, um, yeah. But yeah, the Kindle Fire, I believe, is what that was. But Samsung has some entry level tablets now that you can basically draw some of these apps that we talked about. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, so Sketchbook Mobile or Sketchbook from Autodesk, I think, is the company that bought them out. So
Yeah.
yeah, and
Okay.
MS Paint apparently stepped their game up.
Who did?
MS Paint,
Oh.
that comes with default. I think there's even 3D options now. So
Oh, that's so cool.
yeah, you should check it out. You have the Surface; it's probably sitting there untapped on your machine right now. So
Well, Sketchbook is what I use. Oh, not you're talking about MS Paint. Never mind.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll have to look. Okay, so is there any other equipment that you would recommend
as far as digital goes,
as far as digital goes?
um, I would say utilize your camera, because sometimes if you're not ready to jump into full on digital, then taking your camera and utilizing your photographs or taking photo references, because your camera on your phones and tablets, especially on your phones, are really, really powerful at this point. Um, and you could sit there and bridge the gap between, the traditional world and the digital world, and kind of, if you want to take slower steps and maybe use a hybrid method of using both.
Yeah.
And I do that a lot because I fought digital for the longest time, very long time. I fought digital, and I still approach digital from a traditional standpoint. When I use digital, it still is almost using it with an analog brain. So,
Yeah. I actually started off with a digital first.
hmm
And then I was fortunate enough to receive a grant from the Greater Columbus Art Council to get a bunch of supplies so that I can dip my toe into traditional comic making. So I kind of had the reverse of everyone else. So I felt a little odd doing it, but it was definitely a fun experience for sure.
oh yeah, I feel like I go back and forth between them because each one influences the other, and sometimes
Mhm.
it's okay to let the muscles rest and take what you learned and apply it to the other one, and then they in turn will feed the other one, and
Yeah.
then you don't know what other mediums are going to happen, especially from doing comic books. Speaking of the Greater Columbus Art Council, I ended up doing a mural. So we're talking about digital analog. Well, I worked on a brick wall. Okay, and I used digital in Procreate to establish photos and layouts and try to a grid doodle, and then I went and worked on the wall,
Mhm.
and I jumped back and forth. But comics was always one of the main influences for doing that mural, and so that was a whole new bucket list experience for me. Was again transcending mediums and taking what I learned from digital and from analog and taking it to like at the scale of a big wall on a lift. I'm afraid of heights, and so but yeah. So it was definitely an experience, and Columbus Art Council helped me out with that. So
That's awesome. Okay, so instead of pencils for digital, a lot of them already have
stylus of some
Cool.
sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, mm, I think that would go under equipment, right? Stylus. What do they call Apple Pencil?
Yeah, Apple Pencil if you're doing on the iPad, stylus, or S Pen if you're doing Samsung, if it's a Samsung Galaxy and an S Pen, or a yeah, or a stylus if it's generic.
But I think instead of pencils, we should talk about maybe textures
Oh,
or
like brushes, like digital brushes and
yeah.
textures. Yeah, yeah. The cool thing about using the physical stylus is that actually, even if you don't have a stylus, but you have, like, let's say, a mouse, you can still click on these digital brushes and textures and still utilize them to draw and to create your digital artwork. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, so like for example, since I have my Clip Studio Paint pulled up, I
Hmm.
have all of these different options available to me. So I have a pen,
Hmm.
and let me open this. I can change the brush size. I can change how it looks, so I can have it. Let me get it. Have a pen that looks like MS Paint, or I can have a pen that looks pretty solid.
Hmm.
Or textured. So there's a bunch of different things that you can use: pencils, pastels. Um, but one of the things that I want to talk about is that ooh, so a lot of the softwares will have these built into the program.
Hmm.
However, you can always make them yourself, or you can download them from authorized sites. So I know that what was it? I was doing a project. I was doing a project and I really, really wanted to have fireworks, but I didn't want to draw every single firework. So I got a brush. Oh
Or is that a stamp also?
yeah, I guess it's more like a stamp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just for people who are new to the whole ecosystem of working digitally. So digital brushes, textures, or stamps is pretty much the the vocabularies, if you will. Let me ask you a question, just since you're already in Clip Studio and you're using your Surface Studio. Are you able to use your finger to draw if you didn't have a stylus on that, like you could on a mobile phone or on an iPad?
Mm, Let me try because
Okay,
sometimes. Okay, yes. So
okay.
this is my finger.
So that's basically what I want to say. You have an organic stylus with a lot of these interface. If there's a touch interface, you can adapt it to these brushes and textures and stamps and just change the thickness or stabilization. You can even make
Yeah,
something even like you can refine these things. They're so customizable. So
that's honestly my favorite part is stabilization.
I
So
agree.
let me make this bigger.
When I said I couldn't
Um,
draw a straight line, this is what I meant. So sometimes I have help.
Zero stabilization, so it's a pretty decent line. It's
Yeah.
here's with 100% stabilization. See how it trails behind?
Mm,
So it's good. It's not super straight. That's why there are
yeah.
straight lines. But um yeah, so I think when it comes to notes for us writing about the brushes and textures, I just really wanted to highlight to use what's available, like look what's available,
Mm,
but also know that you can download. Um,
yeah. If you happen to be in the Adobe ecosystem like Photoshop or Fresco, you already have access to Kyle's brushes. Kyle's brushes
uh,
is the go-to when it came to customized brushes of almost all kinds, and to where Adobe snapped them up and brought them in-house to work because he would always create independently. He created all types of brushes that people have been using. My
mhm,
old friend Ray Friendon also creates a bunch of brushes for like what used to be called Manga Studio, which is now Clip Studio Paint. So
yeah. Um, but yeah, with Clip Studio Paint, I know that there is like a community of people online who create
mhm,
brushes and you can download them for free. I know it's the same with Procreate. I don't know
yeah.
those places off the top of my head.
So
So
basically, if you look for assets and materials, is usually the default. terminology for a lot of these different software, including Medibank Paint and other ones where you can either try them out for free and if you want some special ones, then sometimes you can buy them. Also, if you're a creator and you like creating digital brushes, you can even sell those. And that's another way of passive income. I could take a photo of my dog over here and turn that into a texture brush and then, redistribute that or sell that to other people. And so you can go out there and shoot with photos, leaves, things, grass, all kinds of things can be turned into. It's almost like its own art form, its own medium, making these different digital brushes or textures or digital assets.
Yeah. Yeah, making money on comics will be a whole different program because a lot of
you
us
can make money on comics.
trying to figure it out.
Someone should have told me this.
Right? Can someone please tell us how?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I found the 2 for Procreate. I could be wrong, but I'll look it up when we're done with this before we publish the this paper that will be free to download. Okay, so brushes and textures, not really something we can tell you what to do, but just know that it's available to you. What about miscellaneous? Would there be anything that you would recommend miscellaneous? The only thing I can think of is stock-free sites. Or royalty-free. That's what they are.
Yeah.
Royalty-free stock photo sites. And these are going to be really helpful. Like if you have an idea, but you don't have the ability to get a picture. So say you want to make a comic about a polar bear, but you live in Ohio. The only time you're going to see a polar bear is in the zoo, and it's not necessarily going to do what you want it to do. So knowing that there are royalty-free stock photo sites out there for you to use, either for reference images or, like we saw in JM's comic where he put his picture there.
Mm-hmm.
Just knowing that those are a thing. So I'll put a couple down if you want to talk about what you want to add.
What's the other one? I'll wait to see what you put down. You probably are going to put it down. You probably know more about them than I do. There's is it Upsplash or whatever? I can't remember the name of it. It's a free one too, though. But you picked 2 of them right away out of the 3 that people usually go to for royalty-free imagery. But I don't know. It's either Upsplash or Unsplash. It's something along that phrasing. I can't remember it correctly. And then Pexels and Pixabay is the other 2 that I'm familiar with that are oftentimes recommended to get references.
Yeah.
But also, I would recommend if you're a traveler or you go travel or you go into another state, use that phone, that camera of yours to keep a library of because you never know what's going to turn into a reference. A lot of my work that's considered multimedia was sourced from photos I took or that I staged. So some of the most novelty. I once got paid to do a record album cover, and all I did was took a replica of a skull I did for drawing, and I dropped it into a fish tank with food coloring, and I used my regular film camera with a motion sensor, captured it, and then got paid to turn that into a photo music album cover. So
that's really cool because I did something similar, but it never became an official album. Where I took a stock image of a streetlight, where it has like the handprint or has the person walking. I took one of those and I fixed it up a little bit and I added the drawing on top but yeah.
I will go on a secret. So I take my x-rays, or if I go, there's a comic that I'll be doing soon, and one of the images will be based off of a photo of my eyeball when I went to go get x-rays. To get glasses, I had to get glasses. That's the beauty of aging up. And so I also have one. I have an owie on my knee. Okay, it's a cyst that's not and they don't want to operate on it, but they took X-rays and sonograms on it,
Mm.
and I kid you not, it looks like a huge cave in outer space. So I'm going to go sci-fi with it. So anytime I've gotten bones, or we go to dental records. So one time I did freak out the tech because I asked if they could take a photo, and because I had a Leonardo da Vinci pose planned, and I was already sitting on the bed. I was like, this would make a great, that one where they're touching or whatever. Is that Michelangelo?
Yeah.
I don't even know. But anyways, so like I said, almost anything is, with consent is possible for referencing and telling stories and making your artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I have a couple of things to pull up when it comes to examples, but is there anything else for the miscellaneous that you want to add?
Yeah, no. Just the miscellaneous is again, miscellaneous mediums are just happy accidents, to get to Bob Ross it.
Okay, so we've got that all done. I'm going to now show my digital work. So, like I said, I use Clip Studio Paint, and I also like to use reference photos because my artwork, my comic series is called Love Me. It's about writing letters to yourself of words of encouragement. But I like drawing animals. I don't like drawing people. However, I have to come up with like things like, oh, there's a shark in a tank, because how else is the shark gonna get here? But I wanted to make this inclusive, and I had Katrina the cat have a cochlear implant. And so I am not fluent in ASL, so I looked up different how to sign what they're signing in the comic, so that when you're reading the comic, you can learn a little bit as well. So that was something that I could do. I traced an example of how to do happy, to do that motion, and translated it digitally so that you could learn. And then I also did an album cover. Look at me.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
I'm
Both of
sure
those are nice. That was a
all
very nice example, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure we can all recognize these little things, these little emojis. So, just knowing what's out there, what's available to add to your comics, either actual images or like I said, I using reference images. It really can help you either streamline your comic process to make it faster, or just really get that vision in there the way that you want. So, but yeah, I think that's about it for when it comes to the tools. Like I said, we'll have other conversations that go over how to make comics. But we wanted to give you a good groundwork of first understanding what comics are, and now what tools you need to make comics. So, any last things that I should add to the list before I send that out?
Yeah, I'll mess up the phrasing here, but I know you're good to clean it up. But the biggest tool of all is honestly being open to discovery. Create with discovery, create with intention, create with application. Once you've learned something with the medium, then you can have more intention of what you're doing. But don't be afraid to create with discovery first. Create with an openness, and be willing to try things and make mistakes. I have a suggestion for your shark.
Yeah.
I think a moped would work to get the shark on land.
Oh. No. What?
Yeah. and like a water breathing tank. I don't know. I just wanted to see a shark on a moped. So,
Hey, you never know. Maybe that'll be the
or
next
what's
thing.
that? Vespa, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, like a Vespa.
Yeah,
Oh, that's so funny.
yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
like I said, I will have this worksheet that we created. Will be a free resource for you to download on our Ko-fi. I'll make sure that the link is below in the YouTube, and we'll also post it to Facebook and Instagram so you can find it. But it will be on our Ko-fi site. Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/Columbus Cartoon Coalition. So you're more than welcome to download it, look at it, do whatever you want with it. So with that, is there anything that you would like to promote, or how can people find you on the internet?
Um, so basically just the Ko-fi website. A lot of times I do stuff with you all, C3, so that's a good way to find me in the anthologies, chat the anthologies, and local conventions in Columbus and shows like that. So yeah, for now I think that's it. I'm in transition with my social media. It's not my strongest thing, so maybe that's a stream we can do one day is how to effectively use social media with your comics.
Yeah.
Once you've done the comics, what happens next? So
But yeah, check out that website right there.
yeah.
And you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at sydney.kit.anim, ANIM. I'm also on Ko-fi, and I'm the fearless leader of the Columbus Cartoon Coalition, so you might be seeing me a lot. But I think it's a good time to wrap up. Thank you so much, Jam, for joining me in this conversation.
Thank
I
you
hope
for
that
having me.
somebody learned.
Yeah.
Of course. We had a couple of comments on the Instagram that didn't pop up, so I
Oh,
apologize for that.
okay.
But we had, I don't know how to say it, but Ejoy Mayer say, I always go straight to ink, so they don't pencil first, but I know that's not a good way to work. Honestly,
Always,
do what you
yeah,
want.
yeah. Once you get your comfort zone, then you make the rules. That's what's awesome about comics.
Exactly. And there's, we talked about stick figures.
Mm-hmm.
You can make 5 circles, 1 head. Who
Yep.
cares?
Or Matt Fizzell, the Adventures of Cynical Man, who's always at the local shows in Columbus for
Yeah.
Space, based out of Michigan. But Matt Fizzell is legendary for doing stick figures and making some of the best comics. So
Yeah. And Lucas Carl said, I think panels being offset, so instead of being straight, like I was demonstrating, add character to the page at times. And that's definitely true.
yeah.
And something that we'll definitely talk about when it comes to setting up the comic and making panels and this and that. But it doesn't have to be perfect. And
Well,
sometimes that makes the page,
in
right?
fact, Carl Lucas or Lucas Carl, and I
Well,
are it's Carl. Carl's part of our group, and
no,
me
I
and Carl
know.
will
But it's
we'll
just
do shows all
beautiful.
the time. And if we're bored and no one's buying anything, he'll draw a panel, I draw a panel, and then we just make a jam comic right there. Sometimes it's just sitting down with your friends and just seeing how you could trip up the other person, and the next panel comes up with some really fun results when it comes to making comics. So they don't
Yeah,
have to be torture; they can be fun.
exactly. Anything can be fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah, except for no, okay, even veggies. I've come to like them, so yeah, you're right.
All right.
Okay.
Well, we'll see you next time. Bye.